The day my wife asked for an open marriage was the day she opened a door she could never close again. You know, when people talk about the moment their marriage started falling apart, they usually can't pinpoint the exact day it happened. For me, it was easy. I can tell you the exact hour, the exact table, even the wine we were drinking when my wife decided to destroy everything we'd built together. It started like any other anniversary night. 5 years married, and I wanted to do something special. I made a reservation at one of our favorite restaurants, the kind of place that uses those crisp white tablecloths, and serves wine that costs more than I'd ever admit to my accountant. I even bought her a diamond necklace she'd been hinting about for months. Spent close to $1,000 on it, and honestly, it felt worth it. Or at least it did at the time. Everything seemed perfect. The candles flickered softly, the music was low, and she looked absolutely stunning. But something was off. You can feel it when the energy between two people shifts. When the laughter feels forced. The small talk sounds rehearsed. Andrea wasn't really with me that night. Her eyes kept darting around the room like she was searching for something or maybe someone. Normally when she looked at me, it felt grounding. But that night, her gaze slipped away every time I tried to meet it. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was tired, maybe she'd had a rough day at school. She teaches 3rd grade, and kids can drain anyone's patience. I didn't push it. I just wanted to enjoy the night. Then came dessert and the moment everything changed. She put down her fork, exhaled like she was preparing for surgery, and said, "Honey, there's something I've been thinking about. I think it's time we talk about it." That sentence alone was enough to send my stomach to the floor. Every married person knows that tone. It's the one you hear right before the storm hits. I tried to play it cool, setting my wine glass down carefully. "All right," I said. "What's on your mind?" Nothing sighed. Her eyes dropped to her lap. Her voice trembled just a little when she said, "I need to find out more about who I am outside of us." For a second, I didn't even process it. My brain was scrambling, trying to make sense of the words. I thought maybe she was talking about a career change, or taking a trip, or going back to school. But the next thing she said made my world spin. "I want to see other people." I froze. "What?" I asked. Even though I heard her perfectly. I just needed to hear it again to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. She took a deep breath. "I want to explore relationships outside of our marriage. Just for a while. And it's a pater a many sother. That matter and two made of the fighter. Two made a pater and two mater and 20 many." That line, "just for a while," burned into my head like acid. My voice came out louder than I intended. "You want to date other men? While we're still married?" Her lips trembled. "It might be part of it, yes, part of it." Like she was talking about redecorating the living room, not blowing up our vows. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. "Andrea," I said, "you're telling me you want to go out with other men and you expect me to be okay with that?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I love you, Rob," she said softly. "That hasn't changed. I just need to explore this part of myself. I think it'll make me a better partner in the long run." I laughed not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd that my brain didn't know what else to do. "You think sleeping with other men is going to make you a better wife?" People at nearby tables were starting to glance over. Andrea shot me a warning look. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. And that's when it hit me she'd picked this place on purpose. A crowded restaurant meant I couldn't raise my voice, couldn't make a scene. She'd planned this, she'd cornered me. My stomach turned. "Why, Andrea? Why other men? What does explore yourself even mean? Are you saying you want to have sex with other people? Or are you saying you're leaving me?" She looked up finally, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. "No, Rob, I'm not leaving you. I love you, but there are things I need to figure out about myself. Please. Just a few months. Let me explore this. And then I'll be all yours again. I promise." That word promise sounded like a lie the moment she said it. I couldn't even respond. I just stared at her. My wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was sitting across from me saying she wanted an open marriage like she was asking to change our Netflix plan. The world around us blurred into static. I heard forks clinking, faint laughter from another table. A violin playing something soft and romantic, all of it felt cruelly ironic. Finally, I stood up. I placed my napkin neatly on the table, not because I cared about manners, but because I needed to do something with my hands. I finished my wine in one gulp, looked at her, and said quietly, "You should probably take a cab home." She blinked, confused. "Honey, where are you going?" "I don't know," I said. "Anywhere but here." Then I turned and walked out, the drive that wouldn't end. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove. The city lights blurred past the windshield. streaks of color that didn't make sense anymore. I replayed every word she'd said over and over in my head until they started to lose meaning. I love you. I need to find myself. It'll make me a better partner. Each one twisted like a knife. By the time the sky started to lighten, I realized I'd been driving all night. I parked somewhere off a quiet road, turned off the engine, and just sat there staring at nothing. My hands were shaking, my throat burned. I didn't cry, not really. It was worse than crying. It was that hollow, numb kind of pain that sits behind your ribs and makes breathing feel like work. When I finally dozed off, I was still in the driver's seat. I woke up stiff, cold, and disoriented. My neck hurt from sleeping upright. For a second, I hoped it had all been a nightmare. But my phone told the truth. A dozen missed calls. A string of messages from Andrea. Where are you? Please talk to me. I'm worried. I stared at the screen for a long time before putting the phone face down. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't ready to hear her voice again. Not yet. Coffee and clarity. I found a small diner off the highway, the kind with cracked leather booths and the smell of burnt toast hanging in the air. I ordered the biggest cup of coffee they had, and a plate of eggs and bacon. I needed food, caffeine, and maybe a plan, because one thing was certain. There was no universe in which I was going to agree to my wife dating other men while we were still married. That wasn't exploration. That was betrayal dressed up as self-discovery. Still, part of me tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was having some kind of mental breakdown. Maybe she'd been talking to someone, or listening to bad advice. Maybe this wasn't really her. But deep down, I knew the truth. She'd already made up her mind. And that meant I had a choice to make too. When I finally got home later that morning, Andrea came rushing out the front door the moment I pulled into the driveway. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Where were you all night? She demanded, her voice trembling. I was so scared, something happened. I brushed past her, my voice flat. Andrea, I need a shower. Then we're going to talk. She tried to touch my arm, but I pulled away again. I couldn't stand the idea of her hands on me, not after what she'd said. Not after she'd shattered everything. The conversation. After the shower, I sat down at the kitchen island, with a fresh cup of coffee and a notepad. She sat across from me, her expression nervous but determined. All right, I said. Explain this to me again. Why do you want to have relationships outside our marriage? She looked me right in the eye. I need to experience validation as a woman, she said softly. I don't feel like my needs are being met. I want to explore what those needs are, and see if I can find fulfillment. Validation, I repeated. So you're uncertain about what you want, and you think sleeping with other men is how you'll figure that out? It's not about sex, she said quickly. It's about connection. About growth. Uh-huh. I leaned back. And do you plan to move out while you're finding yourself? No, she said immediately. I'll still live here. With you. I just need freedom, time to do things at my own pace. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. So let me get this straight. You'll live here. Sleep here. But also, go on dates with other men? She hesitated. If it feels right with the right person. Maybe. I laughed bitterly. Andrea, that's not exploration. That's infidelity with better branding. It's not cheating if you know about it, she countered. Her tone maddeningly calm. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I took a slow sip of coffee, trying not to slam the mug down. So you expect me to stay home? Knowing you're out with someone else, what? Every weekend? A few nights a week? What am I supposed to do while you're out being validated? Her voice cracked. You're focusing on the wrong thing, Rob. I love you. I want us to stay a family. This is just something I need to do. I shook my head slowly. If you love me, Andrea, you wouldn't need to do this. She looked like she wanted to cry, but I wasn't in the mood for tears. You said this was about making yourself a better partner. But tell me something, how exactly does sleeping with someone else make you a better wife to me? No answer. Just silence. I leaned forward. Here's how this is going to work. If you want to see other men, you can. But not from under this roof. You'll move out. I won't live with someone who's sleeping with other people. Period. Her eyes widened. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, I said coldly. Maybe stay with Jessica. You already spend enough time with her. That name Jessica made her flinch. Jessica was another teacher at her school. Divorced. The kind of woman who treated marriage vows like a punchline. I'd suspected for a while that she was whispering ideas into Andrea's ear, encouraging this nonsense. I wasn't about to let her destroy my life too. I stood up. You'll pack your things and move to the spare bedroom. You can figure out the rest from there. Andrea looked at me, speechless. For the first time, she seemed to realize I wasn't bluffing. A line in the sand. Before I walked away, I turned back and said quietly, if you love me, You won't go through with this. But if you do, if you actually cross that line, then we're done. No do-overs. No coming back. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't stay to watch them fall. I walked out of the room, grabbed my keys, and left the house. I didn't know where I was headed. Maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere that still made sense. All I knew was that I wasn't going to be the husband who sat at home waiting for his wife to come back from her date with another man. That night, the world I thought I knew ended. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark living room with the TV on mute, staring at nothing. Every sound felt amplified, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the faint wind against the windows. It all reminded me of how quiet the house felt without her laughter, her voice, her presence. But I wasn't about to back down. By morning, I had made up my mind. If she wanted freedom, she could have it, but she wasn't going to have it under my roof. When I walked into the kitchen, Andrea was sitting there, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept either. She looked up from her coffee and said softly, "Rob, can we talk?" I poured myself a cup and sat across from her. "Sure. Let's talk." "It is work." She hesitated, biting her lip like she was trying to find the right words. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just feel like I've lost myself. I need to know who I am outside of being your wife." I nodded slowly. "And you think sleeping with other men is the way to do that?" She sighed. "It's not about sex, Rob. It's about connection. It's about feeling alive again." That line, "feeling alive again," made me want to laugh. You know what made me feel alive, Andrea? Building a life with you. Working my ass off so we could afford this house. Those vacations. The future we talked about. But sure, go ahead, call that boring. Her voice rose a little. "This isn't about money or comfort. I need emotional fulfillment." I leaned forward. "Then talk to me. Go to therapy. Go hiking. Start painting again. But don't you dare tell me you need to sleep with strangers to feel fulfilled." She looked away, whispering, "You don't understand." "You're right," I snapped. "I don't. And I don't plan to." Drawing the line. That was the last real conversation we had before things started unraveling fast. She began spending more time out of the house, late nights grading papers at Jessica's, weekend girls' nights, which I knew were just code for testing her new freedom. I wasn't stupid. You can tell when your partner's lying. Not by what they say, but by what they don't say. The pauses between their words. The way they check their phone a little too often. The sudden perfume that doesn't belong to you. By the end of that week, she had basically moved into Jessica's place. She told me it was temporary, just until she could sort out her thoughts. I didn't fight it. In fact, I encouraged it. Because I'd already started my own plan. The lawyer. Monday morning, I walked into my office and called my old college friend Alan. He's a real estate and estate planning lawyer, not a divorce guy, but he knows people. "Alan," I said, "I need a referral. A good divorce attorney. Quiet, efficient, and smart." There was a pause. "You and Andrea? Damn, man. I thought you two were solid." "Yeah, so did I." He gave me a name, a woman named Emily Park. I called her the same day, and by that afternoon, I was sitting across from her in her office. She was sharp, calm, and didn't waste words. "Do you have evidence of infidelity yet?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I will." "Then here's what we'll do," she said, pulling out a legal pad. "We'll draft preliminary paperwork and hold it until you're ready to file. Once you have proof, we move fast." I nodded. I'm not trying to ruin her. I just want it fair, 50-50 split. No drama. She gave me a look. "Fair doesn't mean painless. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Andrea's words at dinner. "I just need a few months to explore." I nodded. "Yeah. I'm ready." The slow break. The next few days blurred together. I threw myself into work during the day, and in the evenings, I hit the gym or went running just to avoid going home to an empty house. I couldn't stand the silence. Andrea texted me every now and then, nothing emotional, just logistical things. "Did you see my red blouse?" Or, "Can you forward me my mail?" It was all business, like we were colleagues, not spouses. By Thursday, she finally called to say she was officially moving in with Jessica for a few weeks. Her voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Don't worry, honey, it's just temporary," she said. "This will make me a better wife in the long run." I bit back a laugh. "Sure, Andrea. Whatever you need to tell yourself." That Saturday, exactly 1 week after our 5th anniversary, she packed her car. I stood by the doorway, arms crossed, as she loaded box after box. She paused halfway through, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "I don't want to go," she said quietly. "Can't we work this out somehow?" I shook my head. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't be doing this." Her lower lip trembled. "I do love you." "Then stay," I said. Stay and fix this with me. She looked at the ground. I can't. Then go, I said, turning away. But don't expect me to wait for you. When her car pulled out of the driveway, the sound of the tires on gravel felt like the closing of a chapter. That night, I went to Home Depot and bought new locks. By morning, her keys wouldn't work anymore. The weeks alone, the first week after she left, was brutal. I won't sugarcoat it, I was a mess. The gym became my second home. Running was the only thing that helped me think straight. I'd go out at 6 a.m., pounding the pavement until my lungs burned, just trying to outrun the anger. Every night, I'd come home, cook something simple, and sit in the quiet, staring at her empty chair. It felt like grief, the kind where the person you love isn't dead, but you have to pretend they are. I started reading about infidelity, how often it happens, why people do it. I learned that nearly 40% of married people cheat. And what shocked me more, almost 90% of them stay married afterward. Apparently for some couples, cheating is just something they work through, especially if there are kids involved. But for me, that wasn't even a question. I couldn't imagine ever looking at her again and feeling anything but betrayal. I thought a lot about what went wrong. Did I neglect her? Did I make her feel unappreciated? Did I get too focused on work? Maybe. Probably. But even if I had, how does that justify this? You don't fix distance by detonating the relationship. And deep down, I think she knew that. A visit. Almost a month later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Andrea was standing there, holding her old house key, the one that no longer fit. Rob, she said softly. My key doesn't work. That's because I changed the locks. Her face fell. Why would you do that? That were no problem with a remorse. Because you don't live here anymore, I said. What do you want? I came to grab some things I left behind. I hesitated, then sighed. They're in boxes in the garage. She followed me silently. When she saw her belongings neatly packed, she frowned. You packed everything already? Yeah. Figured it'd save us both time. She ran her fingers along one of the boxes. Jessica's been really supportive, she said after a moment. I'll be with her for a few more months. After that, I'll come home. We'll start a family. You'll see. I couldn't help it, I laughed. You think after sleeping with other men, you're just going to waltz back in here and play house again? Her cheeks flushed. I haven't, she started, but I cut her off. Save it. I don't need details. She didn't argue, which told me everything I needed to know. The turn. After she left with her boxes, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, sipping my coffee and staring out the window. That's when something shifted inside me. I'd been waiting, hoping she'd come to her senses, but that hope had been killing me. It was time to move forward. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I joined a cycling group. Twice a week, we'd meet early in the morning and ride 40 to 60 miles together. It was brutal at first, but it felt good. Physical pain was easier than emotional pain. The rides cleared my head. And somewhere between those miles of asphalt and exhaustion, I started to feel like myself again. That's where I met Diane. She was tall, athletic, with an easy smile and a calm presence that didn't demand anything from me. She didn't pry or ask about my marriage, she just rode beside me. Sometimes in silence. Sometimes chatting about work or movies or whatever came to mind. It felt normal. And for the first time in months, I realized how much I missed normal. When she noticed, funny thing is, Andrea started calling more after that. She'd text asking random questions like, how have you been? Or, are you seeing anyone? This calls the Bress, and they don't for them drive to Wetberry. When the works, it was almost like she could sense that I was moving on, and that scared her. One day she even stopped by unexpectedly, just to check in. She walked through the house like a stranger, glancing around as if she expected it to be messy. Instead, it was spotless. I'd hired a cleaning service 3 times a week. No dirty dishes, no laundry piles, no chaos. You've kept the place nice, she said quietly. Yeah, I replied. Turns out I'm not helpless without you. That stung, I could see it on her face. Then she asked, so, have you been seeing anyone? I smiled faintly. I've been busy. Met some new people. Joined a cycling group. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Cycling group? Yeah. Great people. We grab a beer after the ride sometimes. She didn't say anything, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. That was the first time she realized the possibility that I might not be waiting around for her anymore. A harsh reality. A few weeks later, I got confirmation. Andrea had been seeing 2 men from the club she and Jessica frequented. Both married. Both using her for fun. She'd become their side entertainment, a secret they could enjoy for a while before returning to their real lives. It was exactly the kind of freedom she'd been chasing. And now, she was just one more fling in someone else's story. When I found out, I didn't even feel angry. Just done. Completely done. By that point, Diane and I had gone on a few rides together. And one day, I finally asked her to grab coffee. She smiled and said yes. There was something easy about her, no games, no hidden agendas, just honesty. I didn't know where it would lead, and honestly, I didn't care. What mattered was that I was finally living my life again, not waiting for someone to decide if I was enough. Andrea had wanted an open marriage, and now she was about to see what that really meant. You know what they say sometimes? The best revenge is just living well. By the time a couple of months had passed, that's exactly what I was doing. My routine was simple. Work hard during the day, ride with my cycling group twice a week, hit the gym, and sleep like a baby at night. I wasn't obsessing over Andrea anymore. The anger had faded into something quieter, not forgiveness, not yet, but acceptance. And honestly, it felt good. Andrea, on the other hand, was on a completely different path. I didn't know all the details back then, but word gets around in a city that small. She and Jessica were practically living like college girls, again going out every weekend, club hopping, dating guys from the gym, from bars, from their so-called book club. Except no one was reading any books there. It was a circus, and she was in the center ring. A new connection. Then there was Diane. The more time we spent together, the easier it felt. She wasn't trying to fix me or dig into my past. She just was. We'd meet for rides, grab a drink after, laugh about nothing. It was casual, but it was real. There was one Saturday, I'll never forget, we'd gone kayaking at a nearby lake, just the two of us. It was warm, quiet, peaceful. She looked over at me at one point and said, "You know, you don't talk much about your wife." I shrugged. "Ex-wife, technically. Or soon to be." She nodded slowly, paddling closer. "You don't have to tell me if it's still raw." "It's not raw," I said. "It's done." She smiled, and for the first time, I realized I meant it. I wasn't saying it to convince myself. I actually felt it. That night, after dinner, she kissed me for the first time. No drama, no hesitation, just a soft, simple moment that felt like a door closing, and another one quietly opening. The investigator. A week later, I met with Emily again, my lawyer. I told her it was time. "Get the paperwork ready," I said. She nodded. "You have proof?" "I will," I said. "By next week." She gave me a look that said, "You sure you want to see that proof?" But I didn't flinch. "Yeah, I'm sure." She arranged for a private investigator. Discreet, professional, expensive. It took less than a week for him to deliver. Photos. Videos. Text logs. Andrea was seeing multiple men. Married men. Most of them met her through Jessica. They'd hang out at bars, then head back to Jessica's apartment afterward. It was disgusting. I didn't even finish looking through all the evidence. I saw enough. Enough to know that the woman I married didn't exist anymore. The envelope. 2 weeks later, Andrea got the divorce papers. That evening, just as I was about to start dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was, standing on the porch, holding a thick brown envelope like it was a bomb that had just gone off in her hands. "Rob," she said, her voice trembling. "What is this?" "It's divorce paperwork," I said evenly. "I told you this was coming." She looked stunned. "You filed for divorce? Why?" I almost laughed. "Why? You've been sleeping with other men, Andrea. What did you think would happen? That I'd just wait for you to get it out of your system?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I was going to come home, Rob. I told you I just needed time. I was planning to come back this week." "Yeah," I said. "Maybe you should have planned a little faster." She shook her head in disbelief. "I don't understand how you can just throw everything away." That was it, the line that snapped my patience. "Me?" I said, my voice rising. "I didn't throw anything away, Andrea." "You did. You burned it down when you decided finding yourself meant sleeping with strangers." She tried to argue, her voice shaking. "It's not like that, Rob. I told you I love you." I cut her off. Just don't say that word to me." She looked desperate now. "Honey, listen to me. I realize I made mistakes. But we can still fix this. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild." "No," I said flatly. "We can't." She started crying harder, clutching the envelope to her chest. "I still love you. The dare jank too." "Then you shouldn't have left," I said. She took a step closer. "Please, Rob, let me come home." I sighed and crossed my arms. "Did you even read the documents?" She looked confused. "What?" "There's a court order attached to that envelope. You're not allowed within 500 feet of this house until the divorce is finalized. You're actually violating it right now." Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said. Now leave before I have to make this official." She stood there for a long moment, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then, slowly, she turned and walked back to her car. I closed the door behind her and locked it. For the first time in months, I felt peace. The aftermath. The divorce process wasn't messy, surprisingly. We didn't even go to court. Emily handled everything. I was fair. She got half of what we built, like I promised. We sold the house, split the proceeds, and went our separate ways. I thought that would be the end of it. But life had other plans. A few weeks later, a mutual friend called me. "Hey man, you might want to hear this," he said. Apparently, word had gotten around at Andrea's school about her adventures with multiple men, including one of the married teachers. Parents complained. Some even threatened to pull their kids out of her class. Her principal told her to keep her personal life discreet, which was the polite way of saying clean up your mess or you're out. But it was already too late. Her reputation was shot. Even her own family found out. Her mother called me, crying, saying, "I don't understand what happened to her, Rob. This isn't the daughter I raised." All I could say was, "I don't either." The final blow. Then came the call I wasn't expecting. It was Alan, my old friend the lawyer. He sounded uncomfortable. "Hey man, I heard something about Andrea. You should probably sit down." There was done rare. Turns out, Andrea had gotten pregnant. She didn't know who the father was. One of the men she'd been seeing was a married teacher from her school. Another was some guy she met on vacation in the Dominican Republic. She'd gone there with one of her boyfriends during school break. To make things worse, she'd also been diagnosed with an STD. Nothing deadly, but enough to force her into a year of treatment and abstinence. The baby was healthy, though. That's the only part of the story that made me sigh in relief, not because I cared about her anymore, but because no child deserves to start life in chaos. I didn't reach out, didn't gloat, didn't say I told you so. I just let silence do the talking. Because sometimes silence hurts more than any words could. A year later, it's been about a year since all of that. I moved into a new house, smaller, quieter, but mine. I got promoted at work. My life isn't flashy, but it's steady, peaceful. And Diane? We're still together. In fact, we're engaged. The wedding's this summer. She's the kind of person who restores your faith in love without even trying. There's no drama with her, no emotional games, just honesty and care. A few weeks ago, we found out she's pregnant. When she told me, I couldn't speak for a few seconds. I just held her and laughed, half in disbelief, half in joy. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt since before that dinner with Andrea. Hope. Reflection. Sometimes I still think about that night, the restaurant, the necklace, the look in Andrea's eyes. It's strange how one conversation can flip your whole life upside down. But you know what? I don't regret how it ended. Because losing her forced me to find myself again. She once said she needed to find out who she was outside of us. I guess, in a way, I did the same thing. And what I found was this. You can't build happiness on betrayal. You can't disguise selfishness as self-discovery. Love isn't about freedom to hurt the person who trusts you. It's about commitment, respect, and choosing each other every single day. Even when it's not easy. She learned that the hard way. And I learned that sometimes, the ending you fear the most is actually the beginning you needed all along. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in a sunlit kitchen, brewing coffee while my fiancé hums along to a song in the next room, I would have laughed at you. Back then, I was hollow, running on caffeine, anger, and sleepless nights. But time has a funny way of sanding down the rough edges. What once felt unbearable now feels like something distant, like a chapter from someone else's story. It didn't happen overnight. Healing rarely does. After the divorce, there were weeks when I felt restless, like I was waiting for something to happen, even though I didn't know what. There were nights when I'd wake up in the dark, still expecting to hear Andrea's voice from the hallway. But the silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt earned. Building something real. Diane moved in about 3 months after the divorce was finalized. It wasn't some grand decision, no moving truck or dramatic announcement. She started staying over a few nights a week, then leaving a toothbrush, then a drawer, then half a closet. One day, it just hit me. She lives here now, and it felt right. Effortless. Unlike Andrea, Diane didn't need to fill the air with constant noise. We could spend an entire Sunday doing our own thing. She'd be reading in the backyard, and I'd be working on the car, and it still felt like connection. That's something no one tells you about peace. It's quiet. Sometimes almost too quiet. But it's the kind of quiet that feels safe, not lonely. We didn't rush into anything serious. I wasn't ready to jump straight from divorce into another marriage. But as months passed, it became clear that what we had was different. There was no need to impress, no walking on eggshells. Just two people showing up every day honestly, imperfectly, but with intention. And that's what love should feel like. Not chaos disguised as passion. Not freedom dressed up as self-discovery. Just partnership. Andrea's shadow. Every so often, Andrea would text me. Never to apologize, not really. The messages were polite, detached, almost sterile. I heard you bought a new house. Congratulations. Hope work's going well. Your mom said hi. The seas were Camberfline, and of reading the rentry, it was like she was trying to remind me she still existed. I never replied. What was there to say? Once, she even sent me a photo her holding a newborn baby. The message read, "Meet Lily." No context, no explanation, just the picture. I stared at it for a while, her smiling awkwardly, the baby wrapped in a pink blanket, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just emptiness. She'd chosen this life. The choices were hers, and so were the consequences. I deleted the message and never looked back. A new rhythm. By spring, Diane and I had built a rhythm that felt natural. We both worked long hours, she as a nurse in pediatrics, me as an accountant, but we made time for each other in the small ways that mattered. Morning coffee together before work. Evening walks around the neighborhood. Friday nights at our favorite Thai place where the owner always greeted us with, "Ah, the usual couple." There's something beautiful about the mundane when you've lived through chaos. You start to appreciate the predictability, the routines that mean safety instead of boredom. Diane once said, "Love shouldn't feel like a test you're constantly failing." And that line stuck with me, because that's exactly what it had felt like before, like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Now, it felt like everything was enough. The proposal wasn't fancy. I didn't want grand gestures or dramatic surprises. I just wanted something honest. It was late June. We were sitting on the back porch after dinner, the air heavy with the smell of summer rain. Diane had her feet curled up on the chair, hair messy, wearing one of my old t-shirts. She looked over at me and said, half jokingly, "You're quiet. What's going on in that head of yours?" I smiled, pulled a small box from my pocket, and set it on the table. She blinked. "What's that?" "You tell me," I said. Her hand went to her mouth. "Rob." I opened it, a simple gold ring with a single diamond. Nothing extravagant, just right. "I know it's not fancy," I said, "but I've had enough of things that look perfect and fall apart inside. You make life feel real again. So, I'm not asking for fireworks. I'm asking if you'll keep building a life with me." She didn't even let me finish before she said yes. No tears, no dramatic music. Just a quiet laugh and a hug that said everything words couldn't. Expecting hope. A few months later, Diane found out she was pregnant. It was early morning. I was half asleep when I heard her whisper from the bathroom, "Rob, you might want to come see this." I stumbled in, still groggy, and saw her holding a small plastic stick with 2 pink lines. I froze. "Wait, are you serious?" She nodded, smiling nervously. "Looks like it." I just stood there for a moment, staring at it, then pulled her into a hug. All those nights of wondering if I'd ever trust love again, if I'd ever be capable of building something that lasted, it all dissolved in that moment. Because suddenly, it wasn't about loss anymore, it was about beginnings. We spent that whole day planning names, nursery ideas, even debating over whether we should move to a bigger house. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have, but it was the one I needed. Andrea's collapse. Around that same time, I started hearing more about Andrea. Word spreads fast, especially in small professional circles. She'd taken a long leave from teaching after giving birth. Apparently, her health had been rocky, and she was juggling treatment for the infection she'd picked up months earlier. Her reputation at school was still in shambles. Parents didn't trust her anymore. Even her friend Jessica had distanced herself. Rumor had it, Jessica had gotten into trouble too, after another teacher's husband filed a complaint. It was messy, painful, and public. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a tiny flicker of vindication. But it wasn't satisfaction, it was more like closure. Andrea had wanted to see the world outside our marriage. And she did. She just didn't like what the world looked like when it stopped orbiting around her. A quiet goodbye. One afternoon, about 8 months after the divorce, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in her familiar handwriting. Inside, it wasn't long, just a single page. "Rob, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I finally understand what I lost. You were right, I confused excitement with happiness. I thought freedom meant doing whatever I wanted. But real freedom is the peace that comes from doing the right thing. I hope you've found yours. Andrea." Asterisk. I read it once, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a drawer. Not out of sentiment, just respect. It was the first honest thing she'd said in a very long time, and that was the last time I ever heard from her. A new chapter. Life with Diane kept moving forward, one quiet joy at a time. The pregnancy was smooth, though she teased me constantly about how nervous I was. "You'd think you're the one carrying the baby." she joked one night as I rearranged the nursery furniture for the third time. Hey, if it keeps you safe, I'll bubble wrap the whole house, I said, laughing. We found out we were having a girl. Diane wanted to name her Hope. I liked that, not because it sounded poetic, but because it felt earned. After everything, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the loneliness, Hope was exactly what she represented. A fresh start. A reminder that even the worst storms eventually clear. Lessons learned. People sometimes ask me how I managed to move on so cleanly, how I didn't let bitterness consume me. The truth is, it did consume me for a while. I just got tired of living there. Pain demands to be felt, but it doesn't deserve to be permanent. What happened with Andrea taught me more about love than any happy marriage could have. It taught me that loyalty means nothing without honesty. That finding yourself shouldn't come at the expense of someone else's heart. And that sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's self-respect. I used to think love was about choosing someone and never letting go. Now I know it's about choosing someone and still letting go when they choose to stop choosing you. Full circle. A few months after Hope was born, I sat by her crib one night, watching her sleep. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, her little chest rising and falling in rhythm. Diane walked in quietly, resting a hand on my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I whispered. Just thinking. About what? How I got here, I said softly. All the things that had to break before this could happen. She smiled. You know, maybe that's how it's supposed to work. Sometimes things fall apart so better ones can take their place. It had be Dittadaughters Wando. I looked up at her, at the woman who'd rebuilt me without ever asking for credit, and I nodded. Yeah. Maybe you're right, because she was. Every ending has a purpose. Every heartbreak leaves room for something new to grow. And as I held my daughter's hand that night, I realized something Andrea never did, that real love isn't about chasing excitement. It's about finding peace in the ordinary. It's about the steady hum of life shared between two people who choose each other, day after day. Through all the noise and silence in between, you never really see it happening while you're in it. The slow rebuilding of yourself. It's not some movie moment montage where you wake up one day healed and whole. It's quieter than that. It's the way you start breathing easier in your own home again. It's the way music stops sounding like a reminder of someone who left. It's the first time you catch yourself laughing, really laughing, without feeling guilty. That was my life now. Peaceful, predictable, and full of small, unremarkable joys that meant everything. Learning to trust again. After what happened with Andrea, I didn't think I'd ever be able to fully trust someone again. Even with Diane as patient, kind, and consistent as she was, there were moments that tested me. If she went out for drinks with coworkers, I'd feel that small, irrational twinge in my chest. The one that whispered, what if she's like Andrea? What if you're about to relive all of it again? It wasn't jealousy, it was fear. Fear disguised as protection, but fear can't build a relationship. It can only suffocate it. So one night, I told her the truth. Sometimes I get nervous for no reason, I admitted. It's not you. It's just scars that still itch. She smiled softly. Scars mean you healed, Rob. They're not open wounds anymore. That one line, "they're not open wounds anymore," hit me like a wave, because she was right. I wasn't broken. I was just human. From then on, I made a promise to myself not to let my past steal from my future. And that meant showing up for this new life fully, honestly, without the weight of yesterday. The difference between lust and love. You know what's funny? When you lose someone who betrayed you, it changes how you define love. Before Andrea, I thought love meant fireworks, passion, that dizzy rush of intensity. Now, I know that kind of love burns too hot to last. It's beautiful for a while, but it leaves ashes behind. With Diane, love feels like a steady flame. It's warmth that doesn't fade when life gets quiet. Sometimes we'd just sit on the couch together, both reading or scrolling on our phones, not saying a word for an hour, and that silence felt like home. Because love isn't about constant excitement. It's about comfort, consistency, and choosing peace over chaos. Andrea used to mistake boredom for unhappiness. But boredom, the gentle rhythm of life, is where love truly grows. When Diane laughs while making pancakes in the morning, when she falls asleep on my chest during a movie, when we argue and make up before bed, that's real love. Not perfect, not flashy, just real. The lesson I learned too late. Looking back now, I can admit something I couldn't before. I wasn't perfect either. During our marriage, I worked long hours. I brought stress home. I forgot to say thank you for the little things. I thought providing financially was enough. But love needs more than a paycheck, it needs presence. Andrea wasn't wrong for wanting to feel seen. She was wrong for where she looked to find it. If she'd just said, "I feel invisible, Rob," maybe things would have turned out differently. Maybe we would have gone to counseling, reconnected, rebuilt. But she didn't. She ran toward the illusion of excitement instead of confronting the emptiness. And I learned from that communication isn't just a relationship tool. It's the foundation of everything. When you stop talking, you stop seeing each other. And when you stop seeing each other, you start drifting apart without even realizing it. Redemption in routine. By the time Hope was born, I'd come to appreciate routine more than ever. Morning diaper changes, late night feedings, grocery runs that turned into mini adventures. They became the heartbeat of my new life. Some nights, after Diane finally got the baby to sleep, we'd sit together on the couch, exhausted but smiling. She'd lean her head on my shoulder and whisper, "We're really doing this, huh?" And I'd smile back. "Yeah, we are." It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't grand, but it was good. One night, as I rocked Hope to sleep, I realized something profound. The peace I felt wasn't because everything had gone right. It was because I'd survived everything that went wrong. There's a quiet kind of strength in surviving what was meant to break you. The last encounter. 6 months after Hope was born, I ran into Andrea by accident. It was at the grocery store of all places. She was standing in the produce aisle, picking out apples. When she saw me, she froze. For a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked different, thinner, tired. The spark she once had was gone. In her cart sat a baby. Hers. I recognized the same soft curls as in the photo she'd sent months ago. "Rob," she said quietly, like saying my name still felt strange. "Hey Andrea," I said. My tone was calm, polite, nothing more. She hesitated, then asked, "How are you?" "I'm good," I replied. "Really good." Something in her eyes flickered, a mix of guilt and nostalgia. "I heard you got remarried." "Not yet," I said. "Soon," she nodded slowly. "And the baby?" "She's amazing," I said, smiling at the thought of Hope. "Healthy, loud, and already knows how to boss me around." Andrea smiled faintly. "I'm glad. You always wanted to be a dad." "Yeah," I said softly. "I did." There was a long pause. Then she said, "I hope she never has to learn what I did the hard way." That was her apology, quiet, indirect, but real. I just nodded. "Take care of yourself, Andrea." And that was it. We walked away in opposite directions, pushing our carts down separate aisles. And somehow, it felt symbolic. Two people who once shared everything, now just strangers passing by with different lives. The real meaning of closure. People always talk about closure like it's something someone else gives you: an apology, a conversation, a final goodbye. But that's not how it works. Closure doesn't come from hearing, "I'm sorry." It comes from realizing you don't need to hear it anymore. When I left that grocery store, I didn't feel angry or sad. I just felt free. For years, Andrea's choices had defined my story. But not anymore. I was writing new chapters, ones she wasn't part of. When the past becomes a lesson, as the months went by, I started to see Andrea's story differently, not as a wound, but as a lesson. She taught me that love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. That freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's taking responsibility for your choices. And that losing someone can sometimes be the only way to find yourself again. Because here's the truth. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. But when life shows you who you can become after the pain, believe that too. Full circle moments. One evening, I was feeding Hope while Diane prepared dinner. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen, and some old song played quietly from the speaker. I looked at my daughter, her tiny fingers gripping mine, her sleepy eyes fighting to stay open, and I thought about the man I used to be, the one sitting in that restaurant, blindsided, broken, desperate for answers. He wouldn't have believed this version of himself existed: calmer, stronger, grateful. Life doesn't always give you the story you wanted. But sometimes, it gives you the one you needed to grow. A message to anyone broken. If you're listening to this right now, and you've been through something similar: betrayal, heartbreak, loss, I want you to hear this. You will survive. You will rebuild. You will love again. Not because you forget what happened, but because pain doesn't get to define you forever. People will hurt you. They'll disappoint you. But they'll also teach you what not to settle for, what truly matters, and how to recognize peace when you finally find it. Andrea taught me what love isn't. Diane showed me what love is. And the man who once lost everything, he finally learned how to live again. Epilogue. The quiet morning. It's been 2 years now. Hope is toddling around the house, leaving little footprints on the hardwood floor. Diane's laughter fills every corner. The walls that once echoed with silence now hum with life. Sometimes I wake up before them, make a pot of coffee, and stand by the window watching the sunrise. And I think about everything that's happened. The heartbreak, the lessons, the second chances. And I realize something simple but true. The peace I have today isn't because life got easier. It's because I got stronger. That's what love, real love, does. It doesn't demand perfection. It builds resilience. It doesn't promise forever. It teaches you to be grateful for every day you get. And if I've learned anything from all of this, it's that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted is the only way to make room for what you truly need. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. It doesn't erase them, it just rounds the edges, like waves wearing down a stone. Years have passed now since that night at the restaurant. Sometimes, I'll still catch a faint scent of the same wine we had that evening, or walk by a place that reminds me of the life I used to live, but it doesn't sting anymore. It just feels distant. Like an old movie I once starred in but can barely recognize myself in anymore. Because that's the truth, I'm not that man anymore. The one who couldn't sleep, who sat alone wondering what he did wrong, who begged life to rewind. That version of me is gone. And in his place stands someone better, someone who understands that sometimes heartbreak doesn't destroy you. Sometimes, it refines you. The father I wanted to be. Hope turned 4 this year. She's got Diane's eyes, bright, curious, full of mischief, and my stubborn streak, which keeps us both on our toes. Every morning, she wakes up before sunrise and climbs into our bed, dragging her stuffed rabbit behind her. She'll whisper, "Daddy, it's morning," even when it's clearly not. And somehow, even half asleep, I find myself smiling. Sometimes, I just sit there and watch her, her tiny hand wrapped around my arm, her breathing soft and steady. And I think, this is what it means to build something real. Not the fancy dinners, not the promises you can't keep. Just moments like this. A sleepy giggle. A hand you never want to let go of. I think about the kind of father I want to be. Not the kind who pretends to be perfect, but the kind who tells the truth. Who teaches her that mistakes don't make you unlovable. And that love without respect isn't love at all. One day, she'll ask about my past, about her other mommy, as she's already starting to call Andrea from the photos she's seen. And when she does, I'll tell her the truth gently, carefully, but honestly. Because she deserves to know what broken love looks like. And what real love can rebuild. The unexpected message. It happened one random Sunday afternoon. I was cleaning the garage when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hi Rob, it's Andrea. I hope this doesn't upset you. I just wanted to thank you for being kind to me that day at the grocery store. I didn't deserve that grace, but you gave it anyway. I'm doing better now. My daughter's in preschool. I'm sober, working again, and trying to be a good mom. I hope your family is happy. You always deserve that." I stood there for a while, reading it again and again. And then I just smiled. Not because it changed anything, but because it proved something I'd quietly hoped for. That she found her way back to herself too. I didn't reply. Some stories don't need sequels. They just need closure. The conversation that changed everything. A few weeks later, I had one of those moments every parent remembers forever. It was a lazy Saturday morning. Diane was baking, and Hope was sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs, flour smudged across her cheeks. Out of nowhere, she asked, "Daddy, were you ever sad before you met Mommy?" I paused, caught off guard. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged. "You always tell me stories about happy things, but Grandma said you had hard times too." "Ah, my mom. Never one to keep family history quiet." I pulled a stool up next to her and said, "Yeah, sweet pea. Daddy's had some hard days before. A long time ago." "What happened?" she asked softly. I thought for a moment, searching for words simple enough for her, but true enough to matter. "Well," I said. "Once upon a time, Daddy loved someone who forgot how to love him back." Her eyes widened. "Did that make you sad?" "It did," I said. "Really sad. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "That sometimes people make choices that hurt us, but those choices also teach us who we are. And if we're brave enough to keep our hearts open, we find better people down the road. People who remind us what love is supposed to feel like." She tilted her head, considering that. "Like Mommy?" I smiled. "Exactly like Mommy." Then she smiled, the kind of innocent, wholehearted smile only a child can give, and said, "I think you're happy now." "I am," I whispered. "I really am." And in that moment, I realized the pain that once defined me had become the lesson I was meant to pass on. The quiet legacy. Sometimes I wonder what my daughter will remember about me when she's grown. Not the job, not the car, not the house, those things fade. I hope she remembers the lessons. The quiet ones, like how to walk away when love stops being kind, how to stay soft, even when the world gets cruel, how to forgive without forgetting. And maybe one day, when she faces her own heartbreak, because everyone does, she'll remember what I told her. That endings don't mean failure. They mean growth. Because life isn't about never getting hurt. It's about learning who you become after you do. Forgiveness, not for them, but for you. People think forgiveness is a gift you give the person who hurt you. It's not. It's something you do for yourself so you can stop carrying their weight. For a long time, I carried Andrea's choices, like a scar across my back, something that shaped how I moved through the world. But eventually, I realized she wasn't the one keeping me trapped in the past. I was. So one evening, long after Diane and Hope had gone to bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat outside under the stars. I closed my eyes and whispered something I'd never said out loud before. I forgive you, Andrea. Not because she asked for it, not because she earned it, but because I deserved peace more than I deserved revenge. And in that silence, something inside me finally let go. When love becomes legacy, life moved forward, as it always does. Hope grew. Diane thrived in her career. And me? I found meaning again, not just in being a husband or a father, but in being someone who survived and rebuilt. Sometimes friends ask me if I'd ever remarry if things hadn't worked out with Diane. And I always laugh and say, I wouldn't need to. Because what I have now isn't about marriage. It's about partnership. See, marriage is just paper if you don't have integrity behind it. Love without honesty is just decoration. Diane and I made a promise early on to never stop choosing each other, even when life gets messy, and that promise means more than any ring ever could. 10 years later, Hope's 10 now. She's got her mother's empathy and my analytical brain, a dangerous combination. She loves music, hates math, and somehow manages to turn every homework session into a philosophical debate. The other day, she asked me, Daddy, do you think love lasts forever? I smiled. Good question. What do you think? She thought for a moment, then said, I think love lasts as long as people keep choosing it. I just stared at her speechless because somehow, my 10-year-old had summed up what took me a decade of heartbreak to learn. Yeah, I said finally, smiling. You're exactly right. The final reflection. If there's one thing my story taught me, it's this. You can't control who stays, but you can control who you become after they leave. Andrea once said she needed to find herself outside our marriage. And in a strange way, she gave me that gift too, because losing her forced me to find me. The man who emerged from that pain wasn't bitter or broken. He was awake. He learned that strength isn't pretending you're unshakable. It's showing up with your heart still open, even after it's been shattered. Now, when I look at my daughter, at the family we've built, I realize I didn't just survive heartbreak, I transformed it. The letter I never sent. Sometimes I write letters I never send. On the anniversary of my divorce, I wrote one to Andrea. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. Just honest. Andrea, you once told me you wanted to explore who you were outside of us. I used to resent that. Now I understand it, because I found out who I was, too, and I like the man I've become. Thank you for the lessons I didn't want but needed. I hope life is kind to you. Rob. Asterisk. I folded it, put it in a drawer, and never mailed it. Because some closure doesn't belong in the past, it belongs in the peace of the present, the message I want to leave behind. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Love isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's not about who says forever. It's about who stays when forever gets hard. People change, circumstances shift. But the kind of love that matters, the one worth keeping, is the one that grows through the quiet seasons, through the dull moments, through the storms and silences. And if someone ever tells you they need to find themselves at the cost of your heart, let them go. Because the right person won't ask you to lose yourself just so they can find theirs. The full circle. Tonight, I'm sitting on that same back porch where I once proposed to Diane. The air is cool, the world quiet, and Hope's laughter echoes faintly through the window. I take a sip of coffee and look up at the stars. Life doesn't always go the way you planned, but sometimes, it ends up exactly the way it should. Because the man who once lost everything, now has everything that truly matters. And that's enough. It's been 15 years since that night, the one that changed everything. Back then, I thought my world had ended. But sitting here now, watching the sun melt into the lake outside my porch, I realize it was only beginning. Hope's 16 now. She's got Diane's patience and my stubbornness, which means our house is never quiet. But it's a good kind of noise, laughter, footsteps, the sound of life moving forward. And for the first time in years, I can say this honestly. I'm happy. Not the kind of happiness that shouts, but the kind that sits quietly beside you and stays. The night Hope needed me, it happened on a Friday night. Diane and I were half asleep on the couch when Hope burst in, eyes red, voice cracking. Dad, she whispered. He cheated on me. Those words, they hit harder than I expected, because suddenly, I wasn't just her father. I was that younger version of myself again, sitting in a restaurant, hearing the same thing in a different voice. I didn't tell her to be strong. I didn't tell her to move on. I just sat there and held her. When she finally looked up, I said, Sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Sometimes people mistake attention for love. But that's not your fault. She cried harder then. And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe the reason I went through what I did wasn't just to survive it. Maybe it was so I could teach her how to heal differently. The conversation that changed everything. The next morning, she asked me, "Dad, do you ever think about her? About Mom?" I took a deep breath. Sometimes. But not with anger anymore. What happened back then, it taught me what love really means. "What does it mean?" she asked softly. "It means choosing peace, even when you didn't get closure. It means knowing your worth, even when someone else couldn't see it. It means forgiving without forgetting, because forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself." Hope just nodded, quietly absorbing every word. Then she said, "I want to love like you and Mom do one day." And that was the moment I realized the story had come full circle, because the pain that once broke me had now become my daughter's protection. The letter I never sent. That night, I sat down and wrote something. Not to Andrea, to myself. "You made it. You learned to live again. You turned heartbreak into strength, loss into wisdom, and pain into peace." She asked for freedom. And in losing her, you found yours. I folded that note and kept it in my wallet, not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what I gained. Full circle. Years ago, Andrea wanted an open marriage because she thought freedom was found outside commitment. But she never understood the truest kind of freedom isn't about walking away. It's about being at peace with where you stand. Diane and I built that peace together through every scar, every laugh, every morning coffee shared in quiet gratitude. She never tried to fix me. She just stood beside me until I learned how to stand again. And that's what love really is. Not perfection. Not endless excitement. Just choosing each other. Again and again. Even when the world falls apart. The last scene. One evening, as the sun dipped below the water, Hope sat beside me on the porch swing. "You ever wish things had gone differently?" she asked. I thought about it. About Andrea. About the pain. About all the ways my life could have unfolded. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "Because if they had, I wouldn't have you. I wouldn't have this. And peace like this. It's worth everything it took to find it." Number 9. Hope smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Dad." I laughed quietly. "Sweetheart, I'm proud of us." The sky turned gold. The lake still. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole. Not because life was perfect, but because I finally understood that sometimes the best endings aren't loud or dramatic. They're peaceful, earned, deserved. Final words. If you're listening to this and you're standing in the middle of heartbreak, I want you to remember this. You will survive. You will rebuild. And one day, you'll sit where I'm sitting watching the sun set over a quiet lake, and realize that the pain that once broke you was the very thing that made you whole. Because in the end, peace isn't the absence of heartbreak. It's what you build from its ashes. At one point, he pressed something into the soil, a small bracelet. I remembered it. She used to wear it every day, the one with the silver charm shaped like a heart. When he stood and walked away, he didn't look back. I waited until he was gone, then approached her grave myself. The grass was still new, the stones smooth, her name carved neatly above 2 dates that now defined everything. I looked at the bracelet half buried in the dirt, shining faintly in the sunlight. I wanted to be angry, but instead, I smiled sadly. Even in death, she was still teaching me something about forgiveness. The return of sound. Months passed, and with time came small mercies. The new hearing aids worked better than any I'd had before. For the first time in years, I could hear rain again. The real sound of it. Not the faint static hum I'd grown used to. And when it rained, I always thought of her. Because she used to say rain made her feel alive, like the world was crying with her. Now, every storm feels like a conversation between us. Sometimes I sit by the window, coffee in hand, listening to the rhythm of the drops, imagining her beside me. No words. Just the sound of rain, like forgiveness without language. The dream. A few nights ago, I had a dream. She was standing in our kitchen, sunlight pouring through the window. She looked the way she did before everything, younger, laughing, alive. She poured me a cup of coffee and said, "You're doing okay, you know." I asked her, "Is it peaceful where you are?" She smiled. "It is now that you've stopped hating me." When I woke up, I was crying not from sadness, but from something close to relief. Because maybe she was right. Maybe peace doesn't come when you forget someone. Maybe it comes when you stop needing them to be perfect. The box. In June, I finally decided to go through her belongings. For months, I'd avoided that task, the thought of touching her clothes, her journals, her books. But one morning, I opened her closet and began sorting. There were old vacation souvenirs, letters from the kids, a collection of postcards she'd bought but never sent. And then, at the back of the shelf, I found a small wooden box with my name carved on it. Inside were memories, a Polaroid of our first trip to Mexico, the receipt from the restaurant where I proposed, a seashell from our honeymoon, and a folded note that read, "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. You gave me the best years of my life. I broke something beautiful, But please don't let it make you stop believing in beauty. Love again. Even if it's not me. I sat there on the floor, holding that note for a long time. And for the first time, I whispered, I forgive you. The letter to her. That night, I wrote her back. Not because she'd hear it, but because I needed to say it. My love, I've hated you. I've missed you. I've tried to understand you. You hurt me more deeply than anyone ever could. But you also taught me what love really costs, how fragile it is, how hard it fights to stay alive even when it shouldn't. The kids are healing. They still talk about you, sometimes even laugh about your terrible cooking and how you could never fold laundry right. They miss you, but they're finding their way. I'm learning to live with the quiet. To see the world not as something that was taken from me, but as something I still have to care for. You once told me that love doesn't end, it just changes form. I think you were right. Ours didn't die. It just became quieter. Like the echo of a song after the last note fades. I hope you found peace. I'm starting to find mine. Asterisk. I folded the letter, placed it in her box, and locked it away. Not out of grief but as a promise kept. The final lesson. A year ago, I thought I'd never recover. Now, I understand that recovery isn't forgetting, it's remembering without falling apart. People talk about karma like it's justice. But karma isn't punishment, it's reflection. What we give to others, we eventually face in ourselves. She ran from her guilt until it became unbearable. And I ran from my pain until I finally faced it. Maybe that's the real balance. We were both running just in different directions. And somehow, in the end, we both found stillness. Epilogue. The ocean. On the anniversary of her passing, I took the kids back to Barbados, the same beach where everything had fallen apart. The water was just as blue, the sand just as white. But we were different people now. Stronger. Quieter. More honest. As the sun began to set, my youngest daughter handed me a small urn. Mom's ashes, she said. We walked into the water together. The tide was gentle, warm. I opened the urn, and let the wind take her, scattering her ashes into the waves. And as I watched them drift away, I whispered, rest now. You're free. The sky turned gold. The sea shimmered. And for a fleeting second, I thought I heard her laugh soft, carried on the wind. Maybe it was just the ocean. Or maybe, in some small way, it was her saying goodbye. Grief changes with time. At first, it's a storm. Wild. Uncontrollable. And loud. Then, it becomes a steady rain, falling softly in the background of your days. And eventually, it turns into something else entirely. Not pain, but presence. A quiet reminder of what was lost and what still remains. It's been a little over a year and a half since she passed. I still visit her grave once a week. Sometimes I bring flowers. Sometimes just silence. Each time I leave, I promise her I'll keep trying not to forget her, but to live again. And lately, I've started keeping that promise. The first signs of change. It began small, like most things that matter. One morning, I realized I'd made it through an entire day without crying. The next week, I found myself laughing genuinely at something my youngest said. It startled me. That laugh. For months, it had been buried under everything. That's when I knew healing wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was slow, almost invisible. It sneaks up on you in ordinary moments. A sunset, a song, a shared meal, until one day, you catch yourself feeling something other than loss. I started walking again. Every morning, before the world woke up, I'd take a long walk around the lake near our house. The sound of water, the smell of dew, it all reminded me that life continues quietly, whether we want it to or not. There's peace in that kind of inevitability. The cafe. One morning, after my walk, I stopped by a small cafe near the park, a place I used to visit with her years ago. The barista recognized me. You used to come here with your wife, right? She asked kindly. I nodded. She had the hazelnut latte every time, she said, smiling softly. You two always sat in that corner table. Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't realized people noticed. Grief feels private, but it ripples. Even strangers remember your love. I ordered coffee and sat at that same table. It was strange, sitting where she once sat, hearing her laughter echo faintly in my mind. But instead of pain, I felt gratitude. I whispered. We had something good, didn't we? And in that stillness, I felt her answer. Not in words, but in warmth. The unexpected encounter. That's when I met her. Not her, not my wife. Someone new. Her name was Claire. She was sitting at the next table, grading papers. She looked up when I accidentally dropped my spoon, and she smiled. Rough morning? She said, her tone light. I smiled back awkwardly at first. You could say that. Or maybe just a clumsy one. She laughed, and there was something genuine in it. Not pity, not interest, just human kindness. We talked briefly about coffee, about the weather, about her students. She was a literature professor at a nearby university. Before leaving, she said, maybe I'll see you around again. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I did see her again. The next week. And the one after that. Learning to talk again. At first, it was just small talk. Weather, books, her students, my kids. Then, slowly, she started asking about my life, my hearing loss, my work, my late wife. Most people avoided that last subject, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But not Claire. She didn't flinch when I said my wife. She didn't pity me. She just listened. There's a kind of healing that happens when someone listens without trying to fix you. One morning, she said, "You must miss her a lot." I nodded. "Every day." She smiled gently. "That means she mattered." That. And that simple sentence, "that means she mattered," felt like a permission slip to breathe again. The music returns. A few weeks later, Claire invited me to a small concert at the university. At first, I hesitated. Music had been painful for me since losing part of my hearing, the distortion, the missing notes, the feeling of being left out of the rhythm. But she insisted gently. "It's outdoors," she said. "You can just listen to the wind if you want." So I went. It was evening, the air cool, the sound faint but clear enough through my hearing aids. The band started playing an old jazz tune, the same song my wife and I had danced to at our wedding. I froze. Claire noticed. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded, swallowing hard. "It's just memories." She didn't say anything. She just reached over, placed her hand on mine, and left it there. And for the first time in years, I didn't pull away. The conversation I needed. After the concert, we walked along the campus gardens. Claire asked me how long it had been since my wife passed. "1.5 years," I said. "Feels like both yesterday and forever." She nodded. "My husband died 5 years ago, car accident. I stopped walking. I didn't know." She smiled sadly. "I don't tell people often. They start treating you differently." I understood that better than anyone. We sat on a bench overlooking the fountain. She said, "I think grief never really ends. It just changes shape." I laughed quietly. "You sound like my therapist." She grinned. "Smart guy, your therapist." And in that simple exchange I realized something. We were both broken, just in compatible ways. The children's reaction. When I first told my daughters I'd been spending time with someone, they were quiet, not angry, just cautious. My oldest said, "Dad, you deserve to be happy again." My youngest smiled faintly. "As long as she doesn't try to take Mom's place." "I don't think anyone ever could," I said. "She's not trying to." That seemed to settle it. My son, on the other hand, was less open. When I mentioned Claire, he frowned. "You're moving on already?" I sighed. "It's not about moving on, son. It's about not standing still." He didn't respond, but I could tell he was thinking about it. Later that night, he texted me one line. "If she's kind to you, that's enough." And that was his quiet blessing. The letter I never sent. A few weeks later, I found myself writing again, not for Claire, but for my late wife. A letter I'd never send, but needed to write. You'd probably laugh if you saw me now. I've started going to cafes again. I've learned to enjoy music again. And I met someone not to replace you, but to remind me that my heart still works. I hope that doesn't make you sad. I think you'd want this for me. You once told me love was meant to be shared, not buried. Maybe that's what I'm doing now, sharing the love you gave me with someone new. You taught me how to love deeply. She's teaching me how to love gently. Both matter. Both are real. And I think that's what life is, learning to love again. Differently. Without shame. I folded the letter and placed it in the same wooden box where I'd kept her old notes. Because it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like gratitude. The first date. A few weeks later, Claire invited me to dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta at a local Italian place. She ordered wine. I ordered water. The conversation flowed easily. She told me about her students' essays, her failed attempt at baking sourdough, her cat named Milton after the poet, not the office supply brand, she clarified. I told her about my kids, about the lake walks, about learning to cook for one. At some point, she said, "You have a gentle way of speaking. It's like you think before every word." I smiled. "That's probably the hearing loss. Makes you more careful about what you say and what you listen to." "Wan non." She laughed softly. "Maybe we all need to lose something before we learn to listen properly." That line stayed with me. The return of hope. After dinner, she walked me to my car. The night air was cool, full of the smell of rain. She turned to me and said, "I don't know if this is too soon for you, but I'd like to see you again." I looked at her, really looked, and said, "I'd like that too." And just like that, something inside me shifted. Not the sudden, blinding light of new love, but the slow, steady flicker of hope. Hope that maybe life still had more to give. Hope that love, even after death, could take a new shape without losing its old one. That night, when I got home, I stood at the window watching the rain, and for the first time in a long time, I whispered, "Thank you." Not to Claire, not to fate, but to the woman who once made me believe in love and, through her mistakes and her ending, taught me how to begin again. It's funny how healing doesn't ask for permission. You don't wake up one morning and decide, I'm better now. You just realize you're no longer waking up in pain. It sneaks up on you in laughter that doesn't feel forced. In silence that isn't heavy. In moments that don't demand survival. That's how it was with Claire. What began as conversation over coffee turned into companionship, steady, soft, and honest. Not a replacement for what I'd lost. Just a continuation of what life still had to offer. The language of gentle things. Claire had this way of making quiet feel full. When we sat together, it wasn't about filling the air, it was about sharing space. Sometimes she'd bring her papers to grade at my kitchen table while I cooked. She'd glance up every now and then, make a small comment. That smells amazing. Or, you've gotten better at this. And I'd smile, realizing she was right. I had gotten better not just at cooking, but at living. We developed rituals, morning walks, late night tea, bookstore visits on Sundays. She'd underline sentences in the books she read and read them aloud. Listen to this, we are healed by being seen. Isn't that beautiful? And it was. Because she was living proof of it. The weight of comparison. But love after loss is complicated. It's not a clean slate, it's a canvas already painted. And you're learning how to draw something new without erasing what came before. Sometimes when Claire laughed, I'd hear an echo of my wife. Sometimes, when she touched my hand, I'd flinch not because it hurt, but because it reminded me of how much I'd once feared losing touch altogether. One night, she noticed. You still think about her, don't you? She asked softly. I didn't deny it. Every day. She smiled, not sad, not jealous. Good, you should. That was Claire. She didn't ask me to stop loving the woman I lost. She just asked me to keep loving her differently. The first family dinner, it took months before I introduced her to my children. I'd been hesitant, not out of shame, but fear. Fear that they'd see her as an intruder in a space still haunted by memory. But one evening, I decided it was time. We had dinner at home, spaghetti, garlic bread, the same meal my wife used to make on Fridays. The house felt alive again, with conversation bouncing softly between everyone. My youngest daughter liked her instantly. You teach literature? She asked excitedly. Do you make your students read Shakespeare? Claire smiled. Only the tragedies. Like Romeo and Juliet? Exactly. She said. Except I tell them the real tragedy isn't the deaths. It's that no one stopped to listen before it was too late. That line hit all of us harder than she probably intended. Even my son looked up from his plate. For a moment, the air grew still, memory creeping back in. Then my oldest daughter broke the tension by saying, So, you're basically Dad's age, huh? Claire laughed, unbothered. Old enough to know better. Young enough to still do dumb things. Laughter followed, genuine, bright. And for the first time in 2 years, I saw my children laugh with someone again, not just for me. The visit to the lake. A few weeks later, Claire and I went back to the lake near our house, the one I used to walk alone after my wife's death. Now, I wasn't alone. We sat by the water, watching ducks glide across the surface. She took a deep breath and said, It's peaceful here. You can tell the world to slow down, and it actually listens. I nodded. This place got me through a lot. She turned toward me. You ever think you'd find peace again? The reasons playing wing. I thought about that for a long moment before answering. Not like this. But maybe peace doesn't look like what we expect. Maybe it's not silence or forgiveness, maybe it's just learning how to live without needing answers. She smiled softly. That's a beautiful way to put it. And as she rested her head on my shoulder, I realized something simple and profound. Peace wasn't forgetting. It was remembering without losing myself to the memory. The anniversary. The second anniversary of my wife's death came quietly. No tears. No breakdowns. Just reflection. That morning, I visited her grave with a single white rose. Claire waited in the car, giving me space. I stood there, staring at the inscription I'd chosen 2 years ago. She loved deeply, even when it broke her. I ran my fingers over the carved words and whispered, I'm doing what you asked, you know. I'm living again. I hope that makes you proud. When I got back to the car, Claire asked, Do you want to talk about her? Always, I said. So I told her stories, not the tragic ones, but the silly ones. The time my wife burned the Thanksgiving turkey. The way she once spent an entire day trying to fix a leaky faucet and flooded the bathroom. Claire laughed through all of it. And by the end, so did I. Because that's what healing looks like, laughter through tears. Memory without bitterness. The storm. That night, a storm rolled in, one of those sudden summer tempests that seemed to appear from nowhere. Thunder shook the windows. The power flickered. I used to hate storms. They reminded me of that night, the flashing lights, the chaos, the sound of my children crying. But this time, I sat on the porch with Claire, watching the rain pour down. She reached for my hand. You okay? I nodded. I used to think storms were punishment, I said quietly. Now I think they're just the sky learning how to cry. She squeezed my hand. Then let it cry. We'll dry off after. We sat there until the rain slowed. And when it did, I realized that for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the storm to end. I was simply in it, unafraid. The journal. Months later, my youngest daughter found an old journal of her mother's tucked behind a bookshelf. She brought it to me hesitantly. Should I read it? I thought about it and said, if you're ready. That night, she came into my study, teary-eyed but calm. She wrote about you a lot, she said. About all of us. About how scared she was of losing us before she ever did. Then she handed me the journal. I think she wanted you to read it too. When I have meant, when be a one of wise. I waited until everyone was asleep before opening it. Inside were short entries, bits of thought, guilt, reflection. But one page stood out. He's losing his hearing, and I'm losing myself. I wish I knew how to tell him I feel invisible. I wish he'd look at me the way he used to. Maybe then I wouldn't need anyone else to remind me I exist. I closed the journal and sat there in silence for a long time. It didn't excuse anything, but it made sense of everything, and that's when it hit me. Understanding doesn't mean condoning. It just means choosing to carry truth without letting it crush you. The talk with my son. Later that week, my son came home from work. He'd started part-time at a garage nearby, and found me sitting on the porch with the journal. He sat beside me and asked, "You still miss her?" "Every day," I said. "But I also don't anymore, not the same way." He frowned. "How's that work?" "It's like, you stop missing the person who left and start missing the version of them that loved you right." He nodded slowly, thinking it over. Then, almost shyly, he said, "I met someone too." I smiled. "Yeah? Her name's Ava. She doesn't know everything yet about Mom, about Jason, but I think she will someday." "That's good," I said. "When you tell her the truth. All of it. That's the only way you'll know it's real." He grinned faintly. "You sound like you've learned something." I looked out at the lake. "I have. Payne's a teacher that never asks if you're ready for class." The gift. That Christmas, my children surprised me. They handed me a small box wrapped in gold paper. Inside was a framed photo not of one person, but of all of us. My late wife, the kids, and me. Taken years ago on a beach in Florida. Below it, they'd added an inscription. "For the family that survived the storm." I stared at it for a long moment before realizing my youngest had tears in her eyes. She whispered, "We thought you'd want to remember her that way." I hugged them all tightly. And for the first time in years, our house felt like a home again, not haunted, not heavy, just full of life. The letter to the future. That night, after everyone went to bed, I wrote one last letter, not to her this time, but to my future self. Remember this. You didn't survive to stay broken. You loved, you lost, and you loved again. That's the bravest thing a human can do. When grief tries to whisper that you don't deserve happiness, remind it that healing isn't betrayal. You are allowed to keep living. You are allowed to keep loving. You are allowed to start again. I sealed the letter, dated it, and tucked it into the wooden box next to hers. Two voices, side by side, one from the past, one from the present. Together, they told the story of everything I once thought I'd lost, and everything I'd found again. That night, after the wedding reception ended and the laughter faded into silence, I sat alone for a moment. The garden lights still glowed faintly, and the echo of Claire's laughter lingered in the air. I opened the wooden box one more time, the ring, the letters, the fragments of my past, and placed inside a photo of Claire and me, taken just hours earlier, our hands joined, our smiles real. For the first time, the box no longer felt like a vault of grief. It felt like a bridge between what I lost and what I had finally found. And as I closed the lid, I whispered to the night, "Love doesn't end, it just begins again in a different form." Then I turned off the light, knowing that for once, the darkness did not frighten me, because this time, I wasn't walking into it alone.